Good of you to join us at this hour. I'm Daniel Che. You're tuned into Arirang News. U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton, who is in Seoul, has made it clear that there are no plans to begin discussions on deployment of the THAAD missile defense system in Korea at the moment. The defense chief talked with his Korean counterpart about strengthening trilateral military information sharing between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. 300,000 anti-Pyongyang leaflets and 100,000 copies of the controversial black comedy The Interview almost made it across the border on Thursday, but police managed to stop them just in time. And Samsung has great expectations for its latest smartphone. It's designed its flagship Galaxy S6 series with the goal of knocking Apple off the top of the smartphone market. We begin with the talks between the defense chiefs of South Korea and the U.S. that took place today. In line with local media reports and growing speculation in the region, the focus was on whether the two would discuss Washington's possible deployment of its so-called THAAD missile defense system in the Korean peninsula. Our Laah Hyun-kyung has this report.
South Korea's Defense Minister Min-koo met with visiting U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton in Seoul on Friday. At a joint press conference following the meeting, the first question asked was whether they had talked either officially or unofficially about deploying Washington's missile defense system known as Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, to South Korea.
There has not been any decision made by the U.S. government, and neither has there been any consultation regarding the deployment of THAAD between the two governments.
When asked why the two did not discuss it, Carter said it's simply not the time for it yet.
This is a program that is in production in the United States. We're not at the point yet of determining where it might be suitably deployed in the future.
That indicates the topic could be raised if and when the time is right. For now, the two chiefs said they had reaffirmed Seoul and Washington's commitment to deepening collaboration in new domains like space and cyberspace. They also talked about strengthening trilateral military information sharing between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo to more effectively deter North Korean nuclear and missile provocations. It looks like the controversy and speculation over THAAD will continue even after Carter leaves Seoul tomorrow. He will be heading to Hawaii, where he is scheduled to visit U.S. Pacific Command. Laah Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
The latest attempt to send copies of The Interview, the comedy movie about assassinating Kim Jong-un, almost crossed into North Korea. South Korean activists have resumed their attempts to send anti-Pyongyang leaflets and movies across the border, despite North Korea's warnings that these launches would be answered by military strikes. Our Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
Thursday's attempt to fly anti-North Korea leaflets turned out to be a failure. Police stopped the South Korean civic group from sending 300,000 leaflets and 100,000 copies of the movie The Interview, a black comedy that depicts an assassination attempt on North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
We wouldn't fly the leaflets if Kim Jong-un apologized or showed remorse for the torpedo attack on the South Korean warship Cheonan.
This group, led by North Korean defector turned activist Park Sang-hak, called off a planned leaflet launch last month amid concerns over public safety. 2 weeks later, with no apology from North Korea materializing, he's decided the launches must continue. However, another civic group beat him to it and successfully launched anti-Pyongyang leaflets and DVDs of The Interview last Saturday. South Korea's Unification Ministry said Friday there have been no changes to its position on the controversial activity.
The government will resolve the issue of the leaflet launches with a balanced position on guaranteeing the basic rights of the people and protecting the residents in the border region.
North Korea fired machine guns at air balloons launched by South Korean activists in October last year. The regime has consistently warned that future launches from the south would be answered in the same way. But with the balloon activists vowing to continue their launches until North Korea guarantees freedom of press among other demands, Tensions on the border are expected to flare up again. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Zooming in on not the leadership of North Korea, but rather the citizens of that country, things are getting worse for them as humanitarian aid from the international community has been drying up, mainly due to rising fears over Pyongyang's nuclear ambitions. Our Kim Ji-hyun reports.
North Korea's most vulnerable people are suffering more than ever. United Nations report on the country shows that roughly 18 million people, or 70% of the population, is classified as food insecure. Also, a quarter of the population has no access to vaccines and basic medical treatment. 7 million people lack access to clean water and proper sanitation, crucial in preventing malnutrition and disease. In addition, more than 350,000 pregnant women are suffering from life-threatening conditions due to a lack of supplies and services. In response to the dire situation, the UN has created a 5-year plan to address the situation, but there's one big problem: a lack of funds. The global body estimates $111 million will be needed to fund crucial humanitarian needs this year alone. Humanitarian aid to the country has dwindled to less than $15 million last year. That's around 80% less than the amount North Korea received from UN agencies in 2004. Pyongyang's tighter restrictions on humanitarian workers are to blame, according to Ghulam Isakai, the UN resident coordinator for North Korea. He says the sanctions imposed on the regime are a big stumbling block to providing humanitarian aid. Isakai says that donors are becoming increasingly reluctant to provide more aid because of fears over the regime's nuclear ambitions. For the same reason, South Korea's humanitarian aid to the north also declined to $50 million last year from $300 million in 2004. Kim Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
Staying on the topic of North Korea, amid tensions between the two Koreas about a wage increase, companies at the Inter-Korean Industrial Complex in Kaesong have started issuing paychecks for March. A Unification Ministry spokesperson said Friday that there have been no signs of conflict so far. Paychecks can be issued until the 20th in February. North Korea unilaterally decided to increase wages for the approximately 53,000 North Korean workers hired by South Korean firms in the complex from roughly $70 to $74 per month starting in March. South Korea has said it cannot accept the request as the amount exceeds the 5% cap for annual wage increases, and the two Koreas should make decisions on wage increases together. Amid heightened tensions over Japan's ongoing attempts to whitewash its wartime past, Korea will engage in some back-to-back diplomacy next week. Seoul's foreign ministry said Friday that Korea's first vice foreign minister, Cho Tae-yong, will meet with his U.S. counterpart Tony Blinken and his Japanese counterpart Akitaka Saiki in Washington next Thursday. North Korea's nuclear provocations will top the agenda, but an official at the ministry said the three diplomats will also likely touch on Japan's historical revisionism. Ahead of that meeting, Korea and Japan will also hold a 2+2 dialogue on Tuesday in Seoul with senior officials from the foreign and defense ministries. A government civilian task force that has been studying ways to salvage the sunken Seoul ferry has concluded that recovery would be risky but is technically possible. Following a 4-month-long review, the team said Friday that simulated assessments have led it to conclude the vessel can be raised in its current sideway position. However, they went on to explain that the operation would have its risks, including the possibility that it couldn't be salvaged in one piece. The team plans to speak with the victims' families and experts before submitting its findings to the government. The recovery is estimated to cost at least $90 million, and the process is expected to take at least a year. Earlier this week, President Park Geun-hye said the government would look into salvaging the ferry if and when it's found to be technically feasible. The Korean stock market has been on upward trend this year, but it pales in comparison to its two Asian neighbors, Japan and China. Our Oh Jin-ju explains further.
Korea's benchmark index has been lagging behind other major Asian stock markets in terms of growth in recent years. The Kospi closed at slightly below 2059 on Thursday, posting a mere 3% rise compared to 3 years ago. Now, that's a stark contrast to the key indices of Japan and China. Over the same period, Japan's Nikkei shot up 108%, while China's Shanghai Composite jumped 73%. And even though Korea's stock market gained some upward momentum this year, its growth paled in comparison to its two Asian neighbors. The Kospi has risen 7.5% this year, but over the same period, Japan and China's stock markets made bigger leaps of 14.3% and 22.4% respectively. Experts say lower than expected earnings at Korean companies since the second quarter of 2012 begin to explain the slow growth. If companies can begin posting earnings that at least meet market expectations, experts believe that the domestic stock market would make a much-needed upward leap. The weak Japanese yen also contributed to the Kospi's relatively slow rise as it hit Korean exporters hard, eroding their price competitiveness against their Japanese rivals. However, many analysts point out that the Korean stock market has been undervalued. According to Morgan Stanley Capital International, the price-earnings ratio, or PER, of the Korean Stock Exchange stands at just 10, ranking at the lowest level among 46 countries as of April 1st. A low ratio means stocks are valued lower than the company's earnings. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News.
Moodys Investor Service has raised Korea's credit outlook from stable to positive. The global credit agency attributed the bump to the Korean government doing a better job of managing public debt. It added that the country's overall fiscal health had also improved and that Seoul was now less vulnerable to turbulence in the global financial market. The agency did mention, however, that growing tensions on the Korean peninsula could pose a threat to the rating. Despite the upgrade, Korea's overall rating remained at the fourth highest level of AA3, the same since 2012. The highly anticipated Galaxy S6 smartphones are out. With the new devices, Samsung Electronics is seeking to reclaim its title as the #1 smartphone brand. But demand for the model's curved screens could slow things down a bit. Our Connie Kim files us this report.
With the launch of its flagship Galaxy S6 series, Samsung is eyeing to regain its position at the top of the smartphone market. The Korean tech titan has dubbed the development of these new phones Project Zero, signaling the company was starting from scratch in its mission to revive its flagging market share. Designers ditched the plastic body in favor of more stylish metal and glass. But the biggest draws are the wireless charging feature and the launch of Samsung Pay, the company's new mobile payment system.
Design-wise, I think it's superior. I like the new camera most of all. I'm thinking of buying Samsung's new smartphone. I like the new features such as the wireless charging.
Market research firm Gartner said Apple took the lead in the smartphone market in the fourth quarter last year, selling 74.8 million iPhones for a market share of more than 20%. Samsung lagged behind, selling 73 million smartphones. The market consensus is that about 50 million units in the Galaxy S6 series will sell in the year following the launch. However, some experts say it still won't be easy to beat Apple.
Market expectations for the Samsung Galaxy 6 are high, but with Apple expected to sell up to 56 million iPhones in the first quarter of the year, we will have to wait to see actual numbers. The size of the smartphone market is limited.
Experts also say Samsung may not be able to meet its goals if the company can't keep up with demand for the curved screens, which are currently in short supply. They recommend Samsung increase its manufacturing capacity to target the American and European markets, where high-end smartphones are extremely popular. Unveiling its new Galaxy S6 series on Thursday, Shin Jong-gyun, the head of Samsung Electronics' mobile division, said the company is working hard to resolve the supply issues, but they could persist for a while. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Today is a historic day for the station you're watching. April 10th marks the 19th year since Arirang TV, the Korea International Broadcasting Foundation, was established. Over the years, Arirang has promoted Korea to a global audience through a variety of programs covering a wide range of topics. Our Hwang Ji-hye takes a look at the station's past and shows us what it's aiming for in the future.
Arirang TV started off as a domestic cable television channel targeting foreign residents in Korea. In 1999, the station launched its satellite broadcasting service overseas. Now with 8 satellites broadcasting around the world, Arirang is being transmitted to over 100 million households in around 130 countries excluding China. While it was busy evolving into one of the main broadcasters hosting major national events in Korea, the station also managed to provide first-hand coverage of those events for the global community. In February last year, Arirang expanded its platforms abroad by joining the lineup of public interest channels on DirecTV, the largest U.S. satellite television provider. And the Korean broadcaster has not stopped there.
We will launch a 24-hour news channel through UN in-house network from this coming summer. And also we tried many interesting and innovative TV program format. And I would ask you to show your consistent support and affection for Arirang TV.
Arirang is also aiming to boost communication between its program hosts and viewers by incorporating information and communications technology in its Korean cultural programming to meet the ever-growing demand for Hallyu content. The broadcaster also introduced an interactive voting system that's based on a smartphone application. It's the first of its kind for Arirang and allows for the active participation of viewers. What's next for Arirang? To become a true international program provider for viewers around the world with balanced, in-depth coverage of everything Korean, from culture to current affairs. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
We've come to the end of our newscast. For more, tune in again at 10 p.m. Korea time. Thank you for watching.